A very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Cheng, and I will be your host and moderator for this event. If some of you have already, I noticed that some of you have already taken a look at the exhibition outside. If you haven't, please do so after this event. There are lots and lots of very beautiful images taken by our photographer, Yu King. And also, at the end of this event, this is your chance to do some beautiful, meaningful graffiti. Right on the wall over there, we would like for you to share your reflections and your thoughts after listening to our discussion. And also, after having a look at all those images out there. It's really such a pleasure to be here on a Saturday afternoon and looking out at all of you. Thank you so much for making time to be with us here today for this conversation that is organized by the Best of You movement, initiated by Julie's Biscuits and AMK FSC Community Services. This installment of Conversations Reimagined is special because it's the first time the Best of You partners with AMK FSS Community Services in commemoration of the International Day of Eradication of Poverty this month. We also want to thank you, our co-working partner, Just Co, for generously sponsoring this space for the second time. Just Co is currently Singapore's largest co-working space provider in the region. They have a presence in more than 40 centers in 8 different markets. Just Co is giving out trial passes for a tryout working at their co-working space, so you can register your interest with any of the Just Co staff that you see. Conversations Reimagined, urban poverty. Work hard, also not enough. I'm sure all of us felt that way at some point or another, but more especially for those who are in the low-wage job sectors, which is the focus of our conversation today. And why is this so? Are there systematic barriers to making a living for some? And if so, what are they? Should we and can we change them? To find out, we have with us today valued speakers to share meaningful conversation in order to shed some light on the topic of in-work poverty. Now, earlier we had 2 human library sessions with Iris and Natalie, who shared their personal experiences with in-work poverty. And we would like to show them a token of our appreciation and encourage them to continue to pursue their dreams even in the face of challenges. So, to present them with a token of appreciation, I would like to first invite Mr. Sai Zihong, founder of Best of You, to present the award to Iris. It is an award, by the way. Thank you very much, Iris. Thank you for taking the courage to share your stories as well. And next, I would like to invite Dr. Vincent Ng, CEO of AMK FSC Community Services, to present the token of appreciation to Natalie, our other human library. Thank you. I'm sure most of you who heard the stories felt quite moved by what they had to share. Before we delve into the discussion, I'd now like to re-invite Mr. Zai Zihong, founder of the Best of You movement, to share with us your thoughts.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking... thank you so much for taking a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and I don't think it's raining outside, right? So, to spend with us to have this wonderful conversation. So, without further ado, I'm so happy to welcome everyone to our 4th installation of this amazing series called Conversations Reimagined. Work hard, also not enough, or as Amy did it much better just now, right? Conversations Reimagined is a series of thoughtful change-making events brought to you by the Best of You movement. The Best of You movement is a movement that uses appreciative storytelling to help us build a more inclusive, empathetic, and robust community. The best of you wants to change things for the better, but we know that change doesn't happen overnight. It mostly happens incrementally, with small actions and perhaps one crucial and momentous conversation at a time. We are here today for that exact purpose. Through Conversation Reimagined, I hope that we would reimagine some of our present biases and challenges to forge a better future. Over the past few years, we have touched on many topics, including the contributions of foreign migrant workers in Singapore, homelessness, and poverty. Our last event for Conversations Reimagined centered around food insecurity in Singapore, and through food insecurity, we examined the commonly appropriated assumptions about deservedness. What sustained our common conceptions about food insecurity was this idea of deservedness we hold in Singapore's meritocratic notions of society. So let me break this down for you. What this means is some of us deserve more and some of us deserve less. This idea becomes very problematic if we think some people deserve less, right, for equality, and in matters surrounding access to basic needs like food. Today's conversation picks up a little bit from where we left off in our last event. We continue our discussion about inequality, and we take a more in-depth look at in-work poverty and precarious forms of work and employment. Reimagining or reconsidering the conversations and language we commonly use to describe our world and ourselves is part of the mission of Conversations Reimagined. I hearken back to philosopher Ian Hacking's description of our self-psychology. Hacking says we are people acting under descriptions. Ourselves are formed not only by our physical conditions and our experience, but also by the descriptions we use to explain those experiences and events. And our world is constituted by the descriptions available to us we use commonly to describe and make sense of those events. So the way we look at poverty in Singapore are similarly constituted by the descriptions and concepts available to us. In Teo Yo Yan's seminal book, and for those of you who haven't read it yet, you should. This is what inequality looks like. She highlights a common perspective of poverty in Singapore. And the perspective is this: poverty is tolerable, exceptional, and an individual mindset problem. It's exceptional because poverty is an exception in Singapore, in the Singapore economy and experience, where most Singaporeans are comfortably middle class. Well, that's what we think, lah. Yeah, and because it isn't the norm in anti-welfarist, meritocratic Singapore, the state of poverty should always remain an exception. Therefore, it can be tolerated. These perspectives easily give license to blame the victim and frame poverty as foremost an individual family or individual problem. You can see how such perspectives also shaped our common language and therefore perspectives of poverty in the following sentences. How can the poor break out of poverty? And what about the people who fall through the cracks? Now, compare these last two sentences or last two questions to lesser heard sentences or questions like, how do we build a labor market where there are fewer cracks? How do governments, corporations, and community, what can they do to reduce instances and preconditions of poverty? The first set of questions squarely puts the responsibility on the individual. The second set of questions, right, examines the greater systems that also include the individual. Now, if we continually describe poverty in these individualistic terms, tolerable and exceptional, then that's what they will be. They will always be around and it's always going to be accepted. These are the descriptions that are commonly available to us. And it's a real pity because it's not only a narrow view, it allows us to turn a blind eye to the systemic imbalances and injustices that undergird the state of inequality in Singapore. Even worse is that we turn a blind eye to the persistent suffering of the poor. Okay, I guess that's my cue to rush this up, yeah. We really need to change this. I'm deeply thankful for AMK FSC Community Services in shaping and advocating strongly for this event. It really is, and I really mean this, it really is hard to find a true partner in crime, right? A partner that you can work so easily with, right? And over the last event, up to the creation of today's conversation, I'm incredibly privileged to have many deep and inspiring conversations with a group of people that we work with at AMK FSC. I'm always inspired also by the way that they are so transient in improving the lives and the present lives and the future lives of Singaporeans as well. Today's event also commemorates the International Day of the Eradication of Poverty. And it is also with AMK FSC's Community Services help that we're able to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Irene Ng, who will share with us her latest research on in-work poverty. In the following section of the conversation today, we've assembled an esteemed panel to help us understand what in-work poverty and precarious employment, what it looks like. And for many of you who have arrived earlier, you may have tapped into some of our human books to extend this conversation. Now, without further ado, I invite everybody, open up your minds and change your perspectives. Let's reimagine for a better future. Over to you, Amy. Thank you.
Some very thought-provoking points there. Thank you so much, Zihong. We'll now like to invite our keynote speaker for the first part of the conversation, Dr. Irene Ng, Associate Professor from Department of Social Work, Social Service Research Center, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, National University of Singapore. Dr. Irene Y.H. Ng is an Associate Professor of Social Work and Steering Committee Chair of the Social Service Research Center in the National University of Singapore. She holds a joint PhD in Social Work and Economics from the University of Michigan. Her current research projects include a study of in-work poverty among the young, social safety nets in East Asia, and the development of universal digital access. Irene's latest study on in-work poverty and the challenges of getting by among the young is strongly tied to our event's main topic of in-work poverty. In her talk today, titled Being Young and Low Income in a Dualized Labor Market, she will be sharing some highlights from her research. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dr. Irene Ng.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. Zihong ended with acknowledgements. I want to start with acknowledgements lest I forget later. So bear with me. And I wrote them down because I don't want to do this wrongly. Thanks, Billing, my friend, for tirelessly championing the cause of the poor. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this important and meaningful event. Thanks to AMK team, whom I also call friends now. Thanks for putting so much heart, energy, and enthusiasm in this work of increasing public awareness of the experiences of fellow humans who are less privileged. And thanks, Zihong, for caring about the down and out in society as a business person. I think that makes a big difference. Thanks to you and your team for curating a meaningful series, the Best of You movement, and in the process putting up with difficult academics like myself. While I'm making these acknowledgements because I want to really thank those people that I've thanked, I think this introduces what I'm about to share as well, which is that there are people who are working hard yet do not have enough. And that is this issue that is significant enough that has gathered many of us repeatedly, including those that I've thanked, right, to passionately bring about awareness to it. There are structures in society that cause or reinforce inequalities, and therefore, we as a society can come together and do something about. For myself, for example, having worked among low-income households for about 30 years and having done research on low-income individuals for about 20 years, I'm convinced that for the majority of low-income households, it is the case of work hard, also not enough. And for others who present as not working hard, it's probably due to discouragement, having given up, rather than innate laziness. So today, I will highlight some findings from the study that Amy has told us about, bringing attention to the double disadvantage of being young and low income in a dualized labor market. Why have I embarked on this research? Well, for 10 years, I had been doing research on government assistance recipients. And what we saw there was, within a year, about a third returns for government assistance. Within 2 years, half return. In 5 years, 3/4 return. So why? Why are people coming back for assistance? I think a major reason is that work hard also not enough. Wages in Singapore are just too low. Right? That's why my colleagues and I, and that includes Matthew Matthews, who's here today, we have embarked on this research on in-work poverty. If the problem is in the labor market, then we have to deal with that rather than keep giving assistance. And we target young people because we think that they are a neglected group in terms of policy and research attention. Policy has been worried about older workers, and justifiably so, because they are at higher risk of unemployment, wage stagnation. But as you will see later on, as I share, low-earning young people are at risk too. If we don't deal with the challenges they face, they will become the future poorest poor who need government assistance. And since these challenges are in the labor market, it's not just social services and policy that should be doing something. Businesses have a big role to play. So I'm glad that AMKFSC has partnered with Julie's for this event, and hope that today's participants from the business community will really take action after this. Okay? So with that, I will go through my storytelling using numbers. This is what I will go through. Okay, let me use the clicker now. This way. Okay, I'll give you a quick overview of our study before I dive into the findings on the duality by occupation, wages, impacts of COVID-19. I'll talk about training because training has been said to be an important path to lift lower income individuals out of the low wage, right? And link that to time poverty before I end off with what can we do. So this study aims to understand the experiences of young, working, low-income Singaporeans. I'll be sharing findings from just the first wave of our survey, but actually our research is huge. We also have a mobile application where we ask our respondents to enter in data in their mobile phones every week. We also have two waves of interviews and also an occupation-specific ethnographies that's led by Matthew Matthews. Many of you here on-site as well as online. On 29th March, we'll be having a symposium where the whole team will be sharing findings, so please mark your calendar for that. Okay, so for today, I'm sharing from wave 1 of our survey. We collected the data from October 2020 to March 2021. That's during when we were still in the throes of COVID-19, but after we had come out from the lockdown, right? We had 1,905 respondents, aged 21 to 38. Our target is the low-income group. And by low income, we mean household income that's low, plus that they have low education, right? We also want to compare them with a higher income group, so we also surveyed 945 who are from a higher income group. Okay, so let's look at the duality. First, by occupation status, this chart shows you by education level the distribution of the occupations using the Singapore Standard Occupation Classification. Right, from left, lowest education, secondary and below, to the next, which is ITE level, then the next is just diploma, and then highest is degree, and then the last bar with the black outline is the overall. Well, unsurprisingly, right, the highest higher educated respondents have higher occupational status. I'm sorry, actually my slides had animation, but somehow in the process of passing on the slides, the animations disappeared. So you see everything on one chart right now. So I'm supposed to box up things one by one for you all, then you can draw your attention to it. But if you look at then the degree holders bar, right, you will see that degree holders, most of them are professionals, right? Then diploma and A-level holders, most of them are associate professionals and technicians. Now, the focus I'd like to draw your attention to is the ITE and below. A large group of them are in services and sales jobs. Is there a way I can point for you? The kind of indigo color, all right? And then the blue one, those are in the SSOC classification are called plant and machine operators. Who are these people? Majority of them are your self-employed platform workers, your delivery riders, your private car drivers, okay? Somehow SSOC calls them machine operators, yeah. And then contrary to what a lot of us think, that we don't have young Singaporeans in the lowest category of cleaning or laborer jobs. If you look at the ITE and below, 5% of ITE graduates are cleaners and laborers, and 12% of those with secondary and below education are.
You can just use
right.
this as a laser.
Oh, as a laser, but my laser, the people online can't see, right? Yeah. Oh, if I point here, they can see. Ah, cool. Okay. Thank you. So I was trying to talk it out, you know. Okay. Yeah, so I was talking about this group. Okay. So yeah, so we do have young Singaporeans who are in the lowest category of cleaners and laborers. Okay. And these are the jobs that our government is targeting through progressive wage model. So when we talk about progressive wage model, it's not just older workers, right? Young people are in these jobs and they will benefit from that as well. Okay, next let's look at earnings. This table shows you the mean level of earnings by the education level, as well as the median. What I want to draw your attention to is the last line, which is difference in the medians. You will see that there's a high wage premium of having a degree, right? Where the degree, where the degree holders, right, earn $1,600 more than a diploma, but there's no wage premium of an ITE certificate because the ITE graduate earns the same as those with secondary and below education. And you can sort of expect that because in the previous slide we see that they are in similar jobs. Yeah? All right, then moving on to impact of COVID-19. How were higher wage and lower wage young people affected by COVID-19? These results that I'm sharing with you are from a paper that we've published, and the reference is at the bottom there. You can quickly jot down the name and you Google, you will find it. Separate Lives, Uncertain Futures. Also, what I'm sharing actually are all on our research project website. We have a report, as well as the link to this article is there. Okay, so just a snapshot first. You can see that our sample is a disadvantaged sample. 40% are low-waged. We follow MOM's definition of low wage, where someone who earns below the 20th percentile is low wage, right? And because we targeted low-income young people, we have 40% who are low-waged. Now, how do the low-wage and higher-wage young people compare by their psychological well-being and the impacts of COVID-19? The next two charts show you that. The dark blue bar is the low-wage respondents, and the lighter blue bar is the higher-wage respondents. So for psychological well-being, you can see that the blue bar is higher. So they have higher rates of GAD, which stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder. They also have higher rates of feeling discouraged about the future. What about the impacts of COVID-19? Going from left to right, the first set of charts show whether they're affected at all by COVID. And you see it's similar, right? Slightly more than half of low wage and higher wage say that they have been affected by COVID-19. But how they're affected is different. While the higher wage, the lighter blue bars, right, more likely to work remotely and have more work, the low wage were more likely to have earnings loss and experience job disruption. All right, so during COVID-19 in the news, we see a lot of things like, oh, work from home, so stressed, right? Where's the work-life balance and all that? But actually, our younger, low-wage respondents don't really experience that. They are experiencing earnings loss, job disruption. And if you look at the last set of charts, we put that there to show you that for young people, telecommuting is rare. Even among the higher waged, the light blue bar, 41% do not work remotely at all, right? And among low wage, 3/4 cannot have remote work, right? So what we read in the news that maybe those of us who are older and middle class, right, think like, wow, I know this is a problem, but for this group of young people, it's just not that experience, right? So we have to rethink when we think about going future, what's the future of work, to also represent the experiences of young, low-wage people. Okay, so now, this is a bit more technical. We conducted regression, which is to control for other factors, right? What I've showed you was just descriptive, So if I put together low wage and the impacts of COVID-19 and see how they affect the psychological well-being, meaning anxiety, GAD, and feeling discouraged, right? What is the result? We also control for social demographic factors like, oops, I keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, age, sex, ethnicity, marital status, all this, right? And I've highlighted for you the significant findings. Okay, so the significant findings are in yellow with stars. Okay, so after controlling for COVID-19 impacts and social demographic factors, low wage continues to be significantly related to anxiety. All right, the effect with discouragement disappears, I think partly because now we have controlled for how they have been affected by COVID-19. Okay, then for the COVID-19 impacts, right, working more leads to higher anxiety, so does earnings loss. Earnings loss seems to be the one that is quite problematic. Earnings loss leads to higher anxiety as well as feeling discouraged, right? And job disruption also leads to a higher feeling of discouraged. And if you recall, it is the low-wage young people who are experiencing more of the earnings loss and job disruption. Yeah? Okay, so what you see is that there is a divergent experience between higher educated and lower educated, higher earning and lower earning young people, right? So the higher earning young people I represent on this chart using the blue line, and the red line is for the lower wage. Again, there was supposed to be animation here, so now there are 3 things in one chart. So listen to me. Okay, first look at the solid lines, and then this arrow shows the difference in their wage, occupational prestige, or socioeconomic status. Right, so there is a divergent path. Now, when you see that COVID-19 comes in, we would hope that the case would be the dotted lines, right, where everyone experienced a decrease in these statuses, wage and occupation. But maybe the higher income, because their wages are so high, experience a bit more. Then it would be this second double-headed arrow, which shows narrowing between the higher wage and lower wage. But what I've shared with you in terms of impacts of COVID-19, where the lower wage young people are the ones that are experiencing more of the job disruption and earnings loss, right? What we see is maybe those who are higher wage working more, right? As we recover from COVID-19, we'll be recovering and going upwards, whereas the low-wage young people have depressed more, and then the income inequality is higher, right? Around the world, experts have warned that COVID-19, as it causes greater inequality going forward, right, for young people who are affected especially, right, their futures would be scarred. There's this word that's used, will be scarred. Okay, so what's our solution? Training and education can potentially reduce educational inequality, right? So I've shown now a new dotted red line where if we put ITE graduate, right, and help them get a diploma, right, the earnings can jump a bit. And then if they from there get a degree, then the earnings can jump a bit, right? Which will narrow the difference between the red and the solid blue line, correct? But of course, it's a moving target. Degree holders will also go for masters, for post-degree graduate or diploma or something, right? So their earnings can also be bumped up, and then the difference might be this last black line, right, which hopefully should still be less than the original difference, right? So training education can potentially reduce. But what do we find in terms of training participation? Lower educated respondents in our sample were less likely to attend training and to attend employer-sponsored training courses. The top chart shows the training participation rates, and again, from left to right, from low to high education, you see that the training participation rates increase. Yeah? Then among those who attend training, you can see that employer-sponsored training is very important. Diploma holders and above, more than 90% when they attend training is employer-sponsored. Right? So among ITE and below, still, right, more than half of the training that they attend is sponsored by employer if they attend training. Right? So employer-sponsored training is rather key. Right? And you already see that there's an inequality in training participation. Why? Why is training participation unequal? I have explanation based on 4 A's and time poverty. First, lower availability. What we found in our data, especially from the interviews, when someone has an N level and below, especially, the kinds of training programs that's available to them is very limited. Right? So we have stories of someone who say, oh, actually I want to go more, but cannot. My company wants to send me, also cannot because I've only N-level certificate. They need me to have at least O-level. Right? And I think that social services will have a lot of such stories and examples which you can collect, and show that, hey, people with lower education actually can, right, go for higher education. And I think DPM Lawrence Wong also have mentioned about how we have to think about what kind of training programs to allow for those who are in more the heart and hands-on work, right, to continue on, okay? The other two A's are related to employer-sponsored training, right? By the fact that higher educated respondents have access to this more, right? So there's lower accessibility for those who are lower educated and lower affordability because if they're not sponsored by the employers, even if they tap on SkillsFuture or other government funding, there's always a co-payment, right? The last A is less appropriateness. We see that many do not enter the jobs that they are trained for. And we saw that in that first occupational category chart as well, right? Where the IT graduates are in sales jobs, are in delivery jobs, even in cleaning jobs, right? So how does that relate to what they have been trained for? Now, the last factor that I would like to talk about is time poverty. In this study, we have been conceptualizing the notion of work-based time poverty. The first aspect of this is, of course, long hours. If you work very long hours, you have very little time left for any other things, including training, right? So we have measures on long hours of work. Second dimension of time poverty, non-standard hours. Working late at night, working on weekends, working shifts. If you are working these kinds of non-standard hours and the rest of society is set up for people working in standard hours, like for example, training programs, maybe they are more available on weekends and you're working on weekend, you cannot go for your training, right? And social life is limited. If, social networks is supposed to be one important way to gain higher paying jobs. But if people are gathering and socializing on weekends, but you are working, you can't be there, right? Yeah. The last dimension we conceptualize is uncontrollable hours, and this is key, right? even if you work non-standard, if you have some flexibility and allow the flexibility to take time off and things like that, and this is, we measure those who just, for example, they know that work time only less than several days ahead, or they cannot take break at all. Okay, so let's look at the numbers. Here we compare the long hours, non-standard hours, and uncontrollable hours by low wage and higher wage. The first three, you see, not significant. Not significant means no star, the SIG column. Not significantly different between low and high wage. Does this mean low wage is, they're doing okay? Well, that's because all our young people work rather high hours. or Singapore, right? In general, we work rather high hours. Median for 44 hours. So of course, mean, right, low wage, there's 43 hours. I think it's pulled down by a few young people who are working low hours, and that's why they are low waged, right? So we need to look at median. That means most of people are working 44 hours, right? Where the rest of the world, I think they're looking at 42 hours or less, as full-time work, okay? So going back, okay, so generally long hours, but if you look at then non-standard hours and uncontrollable hours, low-wage young people are more likely to work non-standard hours, and also the hours are more likely to be uncontrollable. So if that's the case, right, to me, there's a time poverty reason for them not to be able to participate in training as much. And so what does this mean then about using the training route to help them uplift their wages? Okay, so I put a cross there. If that's not an option, then that means that the inequality will rise if educated and higher wage young people can go for training and increase their wages even further, but less likely so for lower wage young people. Okay, so this is a summary of what I've shared with you. You see duality among young workers in wage, occupation, impact of COVID-19, psychological well-being, and work-based time poverty. And this affects the future trajectories, which is referred to as scarring. So what can we do? Of course, improving training participation among low wages is important. So is also improving wages and conditions of lower wage jobs. We can't just say upskilling is the solution. The wages of those lower level jobs have to rise as well, right? And so I put down what policy, social services, and employers can do. Okay, and again, there was supposed to be animation, but let me bring you to, let's look at this one first. This one is just for policy. So I've been calling this wage correction because I think wages are too low, right? So it's not it's wage correction. It's not just talking about, higher wages, right? The word correction means that there's something wrong, okay? So progressive wage model, expanded welfare, right? We need to work fast to improve wages. Secondly, to also extend and update labor laws. This is related also to the gig economy jobs, right? Right now, we are very worried about the gig economy workers, right? But when you think about young people, I think they are no longer, going forward, we are no longer in an era where people are just employees. People do different things to earn money. So we do have to think about updating our labor laws to encompass and protect workers in general, not just employees, okay? Then the next thing I think we can do is in the intersection between policy and social services, which is to expand training availability for N-level and below, as well as in terms of career services. Why am I putting them together, right? And it's not just policy. I see the career services as part of social services as well, yeah? And what I hear about the work of career coaches is they will just quickly refer a lower skilled, lower wage person to a job and say, quick, this one just take as soon as possible. But their qualifications might not compensate to it. Sometimes the qualification is above the job that they're asked to take. And sometimes it might be very far away. So there isn't consideration of the person's need for balancing with their family life as well as in terms of their career, right? So I think we can think more in terms of career services even for lower wage workers, right? And also when I talk about expanding training availability, I don't think it's just a government thing because as I said just now, social services, you have a lot of stories you can collect and feed back to the policy makers, okay? So in that light then, social services, what we can do is to get to know the labor and training market so that you can navigate them with your clients, all right? I think social workers and social service professionals are very comfortable doing psycho-emotional work. But when it comes to labor market, like, so try and get to know that. Then in the intersection between social services and employers, you can work together to mentor young persons with qualifications that are low. I put here specifically below O levels, but if you have helped someone reach O level, you can continue and move them up to higher qualifications step by step, right? Because employers need to partner with a social service partner to understand the social needs of their employees as well. So for employers, I put here invest in the undertapped potential of low-wage young people. I do see them as undertapped because for whatever reasons in terms of living in poverty, right, the employers might not recognize their potential as much, right? And under this big thing of investing in this undertapped potential, it's actually just raise their wages, right? Improve the job conditions so that they can go for training, right? Invest in them. Then in the intersection between policy employers, I would suggest here, policy employers can work together to improve the appropriateness and fit of training programs to career paths. Okay, and also to work together to relieve the time poverty, right? Giving time off. Non-standard hours, for example. I was attending the NTUC research conference and they were mooting the idea where shift work can actually now be automated to let the robots do so that people can be released to do work on more standard hours. So we can think about things like that together. Finally, in the intersection between all the different parties, we can work together on more progressive training promotion and targeting towards low-wage young people, right? Now, this is a point where I have now been repeatedly sharing about policies, even in the universal digital access research that we do. When we have a policy and say, okay, we have now digital access programs, we have training programs, it's very cheap, it's free, come. Who are the people who will likely come forward? The people with means, the people who are able and don't have a lot of barriers, right? And so by just having a universal thing and just say, everybody come, it becomes more unequal, right? So while you provide something universally to be available for all and as affordable for all, you need also targeting and those that will be considered most vulnerable so that they can come forward and access. And in this sense, we can narrow the training participation rates, hopefully, okay, as one example. Okay, that's my sharing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Irene. Many of those are valuable insights, and I'm sure we've all benefited a lot from your sharing. This is for the live audience as well as the online viewers. We're most happy to take your questions now, but we'll start by taking questions from the live audience first. So if you have any questions, you can put your hands up and I'll bring the mic over to you. Any questions for Irene after all that sharing? Yes. Okay, hang on. Okay, someone's bringing a mic for you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for that very informative sharing. My question is based on your last slide, slide 24, where you have the 3 Venn diagrams. It seems to show that the circles are all of equal sizes. I'm not sure if you are inferring that they all have equal responsibilities. In my view, I think policy would take should take the lead and should have the bigger circle. So I'm just wondering, what's your point of view in that?
I didn't think of it that way, but I agree with you. I think policy needs to take the lead, yeah. Because when it comes to training and uplifting wages, right, there's market failure here. And there's a strong case for government intervention then. The government needs to take a lead, but as a society, we need to play a part. And as I was sharing in the earlier on, I feel like we have a lot of policies, but accessibility to those policies might be unequal. Social services try to work very hard, but maybe we're not working together. So my aim for that last slide is to show that all three parties have come in, and employers might be one missing link, in my opinion, from my point of view as a social scientist. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. We have one more. Yes. I think, can someone bring the mic to Rachel?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Irene. Thanks for sharing your research. I think we heard as panelists a little bit about it earlier. I'm just curious, because I think you talk a lot about training and wages. I'm just wondering, in terms of like the education system, right, where do you think policy can change in that area? Because that's kind of like the precursor before you get to those numbers, right? They complete, be it N levels, O levels, yeah.
Okay. I have another piece of research on intergenerational mobility where I talk about the education system. And all around the world, it's been shown that streaming or ability-based tracking, that's called in the international research, does lead to greater inequality to educational outcomes, which then feeds into greater wage inequality and labor market inequality. But at each point of these, like from PSLE to O-level to then degree, each point makes a big difference and can widen a little bit. So for example, if wages are unequal, right, then even if you equalize the educational outcomes, right, that it doesn't depend as much as your SES, right, but if wages for PMETs and non-PMTs, for example, are very wide, then that will also drive different behaviors from parents in investing in their children to make sure that they go the PMET route or non-route. So it's a whole chain, I think. I agree with that. So in Singapore, we have now been very focused on early education, and that's very key because a lot of the inequality straight away is at that part. But at each point, if we don't deal with it, the inequality will just increase a bit. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we move on to there's one more question. Okay, we'll take one more question from a live audience. Can someone bring the mic over to this gentleman here? Thank you.
I noticed that polytechnic below is considered low income, and then in the higher income, also polytechnic and above. I wonder why would you consider polytechnic as low income?
Okay. So this was a to and fro in our research team. At first, we looked at only IT and below. Then we realized that the polytechnic is a big group that has those who are from low-income households and those who are from higher-income households. So we have cut it such that our low-income target group have polytechnic and below and low household income. Then those who are higher income, we say higher household income and polytechnic and above.
Okay, I think now we'll take some questions. Thank you so much for your questions. We'll now move on to the online viewers. We have one question there, which is, could you elaborate more on universal digital access that was mentioned? How would that allow people who don't find training and education accessible access these programs?
All right, yeah. We also have a report on universal digital access that's on that research project's website. So the one who asked this question can refer to our report. One example that we have is a woman during the COVID-19. She was going through an SG United course, but she had no laptop because she had to attend classes online, right? She was using her primary 3 son's laptop. Then when the school ended, the primary 3 son's laptop has to be returned because at that time it was on loan, right? We didn't give. There wasn't as many social service who were like, oh, donate laptops. and she couldn't attend her online classes. Yeah. So in one of our recommendations in that report is that when we think about Skills Future courses, SG United courses, can we build in like a book list that includes a laptop? And if people can't afford, can they then, and now we have different agencies that are providing either loaned or refurbished laptops, right? Can these then be automatically linked and let people have laptops? So did I answer that question? But yeah, so that's making digital access more universally available, because then in every spoke that we have, right, we build in laptops as a need, right? And it's not just based on your individual ability to afford and go and get it on your own, something that you figure out yourself. Yep.
Just to throw in, add on another question there, then can we assume that they all have Wi-Fi connection?
Oh yes, so in our digital access, we put the 3 parts that have to come together. It's not just laptops, it's also Wi-Fi connection, and we have found during COVID-19 that some rental apartments don't have Wi-Fi points at all, or even internet connection. And also digital literacy, because they don't even know how to use, right? Then there are risks, of course. So all 3 have to come together, and the social service agencies have now pivoted into doing all 3, I think. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Question 2, again from our online viewer, it's what do you think can be changed about training and education programs which can accommodate those with time poverty?
I think online classes are great, right? That offers a lot more flexibility, but then that comes back to the problem of digital literacy, and access to resources for lower income individuals to access. So the digital access part has also to be solved to be able to help people access online classes. And I think one thing good that we also have been doing is that we allow people to take courses now in packets, right? So that you take one at a time, and then you can take another one further down the road, maybe even a year later, and slowly stack it up to some certification. So these are some moves that we have done in Singapore, which are good, but can be done more, and specifically targeting and encouraging lower educated trainees.
So it's more digestible, so to speak, like they can manage that with those small chunks.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question. That's it? Okay. I got the signal we have to end it. Thank you so much for your time.
Amy.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
everyone.
that. And all of you, if you have any more questions, you can get onto the Facebook page and put it up on the discussion tab over there. Okay, thank you. And next up, we're going to move into the discussion period. And so we have lined up speakers of different backgrounds to share their work and experiences to broaden our perspectives even more on the various aspects of in-work poverty. So I'd like to invite them to their seats to join me here with me. I'd like to first welcome Dr. Matthew Matthews, Head of IPS Social Lab, a Center for Social Indicator Research, and a Principal Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies. Followed by Rachel Koh, Assistant Senior Social Worker, Sengkang Family Service Center, AMK FSC Community Services. Then we'd like to invite Vanessa Shalini Mohan, Parent Liaison Executive. And last but not least, Mr. Sai Zi Hong, Director, Julie's Biscuits, founder of the Best of You movement. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's kickstart our discussion by the very first question, which is intended for Dr. Matthew. I mean, we talk a lot about in-work poverty, and we kind of, I think, have an idea, especially after Dr. Irene Ng's sharing. But could you give us a really clear definition of what exactly do we mean by in-work poverty?
Thank you very much. I don't have a clear definition, and because the concept itself is expensive, and if you read a lot of the literature, there's quite a few components of that. But what's very, very clear, and I think Irene has already spelled it out, and we already talked about it, is that there's an expectation that when you are able to work, that is able to take care of your needs, your basic needs, is also be able to, make sure that you are able to continue to experience life as the rest of society, don't feel deprived. Also have that opportunity to be able to move up, have opportunities for your children to continue to aspire. But unfortunately, quite a bit of work does not give that. So people, especially, sometimes salaries are tied in such a way that even though you're working, it's just enough for yourself. If you've got dependents, there's just no way that you will be able to sustain yourself and your dependents at the same time. And also perhaps that work will give you a salary which is just enough to get by, survival type of needs, but certainly not able to aspire. And if you think about social mobility, you talk about opportunities, you do need to have certain kind of baseline, right? If every day what your wages can afford you is you really have to just sleep at the floor and your children have to do that, and next morning it's very hard for them to get up and get back, go through school and go through the gruels of school and feel rested, then certainly that wage is not able to help them to have those opportunities. So really, if you look at all those things, that's inward poverty.
Okay, thanks for that. The second question is, it seems that a common belief in Singapore is that if you work hard, you will have enough to live on. But why are there people who work hard but are still perennially poor? Dr. Matthew, maybe you can start and then we'll move down.
Thanks. Start off with, I think Irene has mentioned it quite a bit. Sometimes it's just structure which hinder people, right? Or don't give them enough of a salary. If you think about how sometimes a differentiation is done, sometimes same kind of work, but if you have a degree and if you have an IT cert, you might be doing the same thing, but the employer pays you very differently. And of course, so that's structural. So people just have that, and of course that salary is benchmarked in with an idea that you just hardly need anything just to survive. So that's that. And then number two, I think there's another big part, to me, is that sometimes people work very hard, but because the structures of their work do not take care of any kind of exigency. When something goes wrong, then immediately they are in square one. They might have built up capacity to work. Something goes wrong, then immediately everything goes. And I think that's because of a lack of social protection. So I think those things have to come together.
Yeah, I think thanks, Dr. Matthews, for sharing that. I think before I even answer, I just want to thank all the clients I've actually worked with. I think it's through working with them that I can really understand their experiences. And I think what Dr. Matthews shared is really very real. I think I've encountered working with a lot of single moms and low-income families, and they have things like limited caregiving support. Things like childcare services don't extend to the evening times, and they can't pursue upskilling and training easily. And when you have already chronic financial issues, you have a debt, maybe it just started as a $300 couch, and it turns into a $3,000 cots debt, right? If your single income earner gets sick, right? How exactly are you supposed to clear that? And I think that's when you really see these families that are really trying to get themselves out of their multi-stress lives, but they just have so much bandwidth tax. I mean, already, I'm sure anyone who's a parent here knows that one child gets sick, the whole team gets sick. Yeah, and
sorry, Rachel, I'll just interject here. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what bandwidth tax is. I know it's from the book Scarcity, right? Written by...
I don't recall specifically, but maybe you know better than me. But I guess essentially, these families are going through lots of different kinds of stresses. Yeah, you have your financial stress. I think a lot of these families also have health issues and things like employment. And they're trying to manage all of these things. They basically can't, right? And actually, to be fair, I think sometimes social services, so we're kind of encouraging them that, you need to do this. And yeah, sometimes this causes more stress for these families that are already trying their best. And like what Dr. Irene said, I think a lot of the families I work with now, they were once these young mothers and women who, were trying to figure things out. And I think there's also some expectations that they have of their own children when they later on start earning to actually contribute back to these families, because these families are really, really stuck. So I think that's why even for the moms now and their children moving forward, they continue to struggle in these areas.
Vanessa?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa. Yes, I'm actually a single mom of 3 who was a preschool teacher for a good 10 years. Yeah. So I'm here a little bit to share my story. Yeah, honestly, what happened was like a struggle of like, whether is it going to be your passion or whether is it going to be the income that you have to actually feed your children. Yeah, because they are so much important to you. And at the end of the day, first thing, being a single mom, yeah, it's a single income. So whatever choices you make, right, it's so important because it affects the life of your children directly. And there is no way that you can say, oh no, my partner, no, there's no partner there. So it's just you. It's every single thing that you do, every step that you take, every moment that you live. It's all about, about you and your children. So it was such a situation for me after 10 years of being in the industry and looking at the career progression of a preschool teacher. So earlier, Dr. Irene was sharing. So I am that N-level holder. I am that N-level holder who is stuck by this entire system whereby, I have to go through so many foundation courses in order to actually get a diploma. But if I were to do that and, pursue my passion, the income that I'll be bringing, honestly, for a 0 to 3-year-old teacher, the basic income is $2,500. And given my age group after deduction, I bring home $1,900 with 3 children, and transportation to go to work because I want to do well. I want to come out of this cycle of poverty. I want to be responsible for the children I gave birth to. And also, at the same time, to be able to feed them, to live a debt-free life, let's just put it that way. Yeah. So how will I do all of that in $1,900? So then and when I actually approached my organization saying, I'm actually keen to upskill myself, I would like to go for courses and all that. So they tell me, the first question that, a mom like me will face, right? How are you going to do it financially? How are you going to manage your children? How are you going to manage the work that we have for you as well? Because you've got to do everything in order to upskill yourself. So who's going to care for your children while you are in class? So there's no alternate caregiving. Should we not be able to rely on our parents or any other family members? Of course, there's no talk about maid here, So, or a partner, like I said. So there is, it all amounts to all on us. And if I were to wait for the employer to actually sponsor me, they're gonna keep asking you the question every single time. Even if I do well in my current, that year they review me as a teacher, I did well. My parents say nice things about me. They say, oh, Teacher Vanessa should go up. Yeah, so it went out back and forth, a good 5 years in my work. And then I realized that no. So my brother told me, you look here, you have to wake up. It's not passion anymore. Be passionate about the children that you have. You know what I mean? So, you have to make a decision. That is when I actually stepped out of the early childhood industry because I'm looking at least another 5 years to actually be even in the diploma side, to be even a senior teacher, so to speak. And although with 10 years of experience, I can't get to a senior teacher position without a diploma. So, or a lead teacher, so to speak. Or then principal level, HQ level, I need to go up for a degree thereafter. That's going to we are looking at a 10-year, and in 10 years, what will happen to my children in that period of time? So it's not going to be a very realistic thing. So I had to make a decision earlier this year. So I actually took a very long break to actually detach myself from the love of teaching. It was terrible, but I had to. And also because as a single mom, right, my youngest son is actually a little bit on the high energy side. So you may think, or what people outside may perceive, right, it's all a women environment, they are all mothers too, they will understand you when you're not there at work, when you need to attend for your children. No. There is no relief. If Teacher Vanessa is not here, her phone will be ringing. What do we do next? What do we do next? How do we attend to this child? How do we attend to the parents? That kind of thing. So it's like a never-ending thing. And even if you're present at work and a parents decide to send an email or a concern and all that, you get your work messages from 10 to 11 o'clock. So I know all of y'all would have seen ECDAS. If ECDA, Early Childhood Development Agency's advertisement, we shape the future of tomorrow. Honestly, I'm going to ask myself, and I was asking the panelists the other day, my future is a question mark. How will I shape the future of another? I was asking myself that, because really, I don't know how will I raise my own children, and I need to raise your child. I would love to. I'll give you my 110, but honestly, the remuneration for teachers are very, very, very little and the amount of time, the work that we bring home, your children's portfolio, every one of you who have a preschooler here, you want to see their first smile, their first, when they first use the spoon and all that. Is a lot of things on us that we got to write love letters after love letters to parents, yes, but that is, taking a toll on our children, whereby, the weekends that we get to spend with our children, we write our reports and all those things, our portfolios and all that. So are we remunerated enough? Honestly, that's a real big question. So after much thought, I decided to leave the industry in the sense of teaching. Now I'm working from the HQ level, doing a lot of liaising with parents to actually enroll their children to make lives of preschool teachers more interesting. Just kidding. But I'm because I'm still in the industry because I love children. We really want to shape the future of tomorrow. But please help us shape ours too. That's what I'm asking. Yeah, and we really need that as respect. That and every parent who work from home, like Teacher Vanessa, thank God you are here. That's what they tell us. They want to put their child with us and all that. We do understand that it's not easy to work with a child from, work from home with a child and everything at all. But certain times, right, when we ask parents, hey, your child is sick, can you please take back your child? Oh, the love letter from the parents come, oh no, this teacher, says this thing, they don't want to accept my child, it's not COVID, just flu. Yeah, just flu. But of course, we have also some SOPs to follow. So there's like, the lack of respect and for teachers as well that was in the industry, and I think a lot of work needs to be put into that as well. All right. So I was going to tell you of a story. So after I actually decided to actually move away from teaching, so I wanted to be in the same industry. So I was looking at enrichment centers and all that. And I made a discussion with my principal, my then principal, who actually supported me because she knows that the demands of my children. So whenever I need to rush to the school, I have to go. And another colleague will have to do it willingly. But how willingly, we do not know. Or maybe we can tell, because it's extra workload for them. I really thank my colleagues, my ex-colleagues. But so when I stepped out, the first interview that I went was disastrous. I have to be honest. There was no other word for me to describe it because when I went there after...
Vanessa,
yeah.
This one, right? Can we keep it for the later question?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. So let's push it to
the later part.
Yeah,
the
the
later
later
part.
part. So,
So,
Zai, so back to...
hang on to that because it's a
it's a good
really,
story.
Yeah, good story, but it's also a really bad story, like awful, Yeah, but and I thank you, Vanessa. I'm just I'm speechless. When we had a rehearsal, I went back and just felt so guilty for everything I do as an employee. So if you must know, I'm here representing corporates and what we should do and what we should not do. But back to this question of how people are perennially the working poor, I think it's mainly because, as Irene mentioned just now, as that gentleman who asked that question mentioned just now as well, there's a market failure and the government is not intervening. I say this, Julie's is a Malaysian company, right? But we have Singaporean tentacles as well. We have obviously Singaporean tentacles as well. And one of the things that I think works in Malaysia is that Malaysia does have a minimum wage, and it has had a minimum wage since 2013. And of course, everyone was upset about it, especially corporates was upset. I mean, some sectors of my business were upset about it as well. But it's the right thing to do. And as much as, it seems like, the government here doesn't want to talk about a minimum wage, right? I think it's still important to put that piece on the table because it applies to everybody. Universal, something like this that's universal is crucial. I can always just keep on saying that the corporates are not doing enough, and just hop on it. But it really is true. I think why a lot of people are, as Vanessa's story exemplifies, is that we are not paying enough. Yeah. So I'll stop there, and then I guess we can move on to the next question because a lot of the points can be further expanded from there. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Okay, the third question is, precarious employment is closely linked to in-work poverty. What does precarity or precarious employment mean exactly? And what does it look like in Singapore compared to other countries? So Dr. Matthew, if you can share that with us.
Just think about precarious work. I mean, in work is, and of course these are definitions where there's a lot of different ideas about these definitions. Some people talk about decent work, not decent work. And I mean, to start off with, I think our aspirations of what work should be, giving us a safe environment, adequate wages to take care of ourselves, providing us adequate healthcare, security, making sure that we've got time off to do some of the things that we need to do to sustain ourselves. Those are important aspects of decent work. When you think about precarious work, it's obviously very often it's seen as the kind of opposite of that, not having many of those things. It comes with a certain level of vulnerability. One, of course, a job, you don't know whether the job is sustainable. It's here now, is gone tomorrow, or it can easily kind of be replaced or taken away. When we think about, especially about precarious work, I mean, the term precarious has got to do, comes from the actual word, comes from the word to pray. You're so dependent on other people to take care of you. You have to, essentially, you've got to beg and make sure that everyone is trying to help you to be able to get your wages. So you've got no rights as such, got no rights to determine what your salary would be, no rights to determine when you want to, to be able to get the kind of protection for the future. In Singapore, a few things. We did a study, and this is part of some of the work that Irene and the rest of us worked on in terms of in-work poverty. And one part has got to do with platform work. I think we'll talk about that in a while's time, but there's a little paper about that. When we think about some of the precarious work in Singapore, one big part of it is the lack of social protections. And one of it, of course, is CPF. When you don't have a long-term view, you won't be able to have enough, whether it's to get a house, whether it's to be able to take care of future retirement needs. So trying to sum up some big ideas about precarious work.
And the next question is actually particularly relevant, especially with the impact of COVID, which has seen the rise of platform workers or the gig economy workers, like what Dr. Irene mentioned earlier. They make up at least 3% of Singapore's working population, which means 73,000 plus workers are doing platform work. And even the government recognizes the need to protect this group of workers as they fall outside of the conventional employment. So directed to you, Dr. Matthews, if you could share the precarity of platform workers in particular, and later, Rachel, if you can share about precarity in the other low-wage job sectors as well, that would be great. Dr. Matthew?
Yeah, if you would like to read more about this, there's a paper that we have, my colleagues Wen Lee, Shamil, Clara, we've got a paper, it's a few 200 pages, so it's got, nice thing, it doesn't just have tables, it also has lots of human interest type of stories, so it might be quite interesting. You can kind of Google it and get that. But the thing about platform work is really the kind of work that people, buy and sell using some kind of, or give their labor and others require their services using some kind of technology platform. Which is often run by some kind of algorithm. So there's some kind of way people are matched together. That's essentially the broader or more specific definition about platform work. Now in Singapore, platform work, you see the most common one is really about the picture here, right? Food delivery is a very, very common platform work, private hire cars. And there are, I think, some cleaning jobs are also platform type. Platform work is interesting because in this case, you do feel a certain sense of empowerment. As a platform worker, you're able to decide when you want to work, when you don't want to work. So it seems to be very empowering. So there's lots of talk about flexibility. But yet the reality about platform work is that when is what we began to learn as we did that research, is that platform work, really, you're at the mercy of changes all over. If a company decides that they would have tons of people to join that particular platform, then it would mean that the next time you want to get something, the pricing of that will become extremely low. So you don't have any protection about the pricing. You can ask. You've got no power to begin with to say, how much do I want? How much is a fair wage to be able to pick up some food item from this place and send it there? What would really account for whether it's my time, the petrol that's incurred, the risk that is incurred in that work setting? None of those. It just depends. If thousands of people are coming on the platform that time, then it could be 50 cents. To be able to do that job. So many of these considerations that happen with the platform. Now, one of the big aspects about platform work, and one thing that I'm particularly concerned about, is that people who get onto platforms oftentimes do not have they come in with a certain kind of, they do that, they hope to do that for a short season, but what happens is they get very quickly entrenched into that. Platform does provide some, it does provide some decent remuneration if you work very, very hard, but you really have to work very hard. In fact, we use the word the grind. You have to work many, many hours. You get something decent, but then it puts you in a situation where, one, you can be very susceptible to injury, and the moment you get injured, that's the end of that platform occupation, and then what comes after that? It becomes a very, very big question. I won't talk too much of it, I think.
I think there's a story too that I read based on the research that you've done. There was an interview done where a rider, I think it was, shared that he has an accident at least once every month, either major or minor, which that's just not the way to go about expecting that to happen in the first place, Yeah.
It is true, because the accidents are common, and the once a month was not serious enough for him to completely stop. But of course, it puts fear, it puts lots more stress. It's certainly inconvenient, and very soon, and we've seen those riders who have had a few, and you come to a stage where it just is too painful in your body to be able to continue, and then you're kind of in a lurch because you don't have any other options.
And even for the drivers too, they need to drive about 12 to 13 hours in order to hit an acceptable level of income to be able to take home, which means they have to work through peak hours, no lunch, no dinner, and even maybe not taking toilet breaks. So
it all has a toll later on, right? So you talk about health issues. In fact, many the drivers on our survey, we noticed that many of them reported that their health had gone down in a good number of metrics. So some of the realities of the kind of work you do. And of course, there's no adequate health insurance protection. So of course, that kind of leads you into a downward decline.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I think I read Dr. Matthew's paper. It is long, but you can read through it. It's quite interesting. I think for me, in particular, there's this whole idea about trying to figure out the algorithm, right? Trying to figure out how you can win the system, but the system keeps changing. And I think in some way, I also see that, a bit differently with some of the clients that I work with, but I see that a lot of the jobs that they're in are very dispensable in that sense, right? If you can't work, I can just find someone else to do that work. I can just interview someone. Someone's going to be able to come and do that, be it in the retail line or in the F&B sector. And I guess it also points to this idea of occupational security that I think in the research they really talk about, which is very different from job security. For me and my fellow social workers that are here, I think we can more or less say that we know that we will probably be employed for the next few years unless we really mess something up. And we probably can also climb up, right? We will probably be assistant seniors at some point of time. Yeah, but for a lot of these people that are working in these dispensable jobs, right, they don't know when they're going to be promoted, what's happening next, or if they're going to go and find another job. So I've actually seen a client every few months after I call her, she's in a different job or in a different job situation. I'm just so confused. So one moment she was an admin for a really long time. Then after that she had to change. She was a swabber. She was swabbing at this area. And then now she's at another hospital. And then after that she became a patient service associate for 3 months. And then she told me, that didn't continue. And now she's ad hoc. And it depends on when she can get jobs. And I guess that's really things that we can't foresee and we don't really experience unless we are really working in these industries. And I think I also just wanted to highlight, talking about these work conditions. I think as part of planning for this event, I think we actually reached out to some of our clients to actually have them be part of the human library or even be on the panel as well. And initially our clients did say yes, but then they slowly realized that they had to work on a Saturday. Or one of my clients actually got a new job and she had to work on a Saturday, so she couldn't join me on this panel. And I think that really reflects what Dr. Irene was saying, right? We were just playing like two different games in that sense. Yeah, so I think this is a reality of many of the lives our clients face.
And on that note, what do you think are some of the barriers that may prevent the working poor from employment options or changing their line of work or career? So, Rachel, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
I can take that question. I think it kind of leads earlier to the question that I actually asked Dr. Irene about the education system. I think it's something that as a social service professional, I really struggle with, because I think there's that narrative that our society has kind of been driving forward, right? We have this meritocratic structure. Every school is a good school. And, we believe that that's the way out to kind of alleviate poverty. And I think on our own, we also wonder, what is this paper chase that we're all part of? And in some ways, does that mean that we discount things like craft or trade or even artistry that would otherwise be valued in certain countries? I mean, I watch YouTube videos of people who are like potters and artists, or they even copy art. They don't even have to create the art, right? So is education the best way out? I'm not too sure. And should we keep pushing that for our clients as well? But on the other hand, I see clients that repeatedly tell me that they want to upskill. Like, they tell me they want to go for training, but what Dr. Irene said, like maybe they don't have even a PSLE certificate. They haven't done N levels, and that even adds on to like that lack of confidence. They haven't been in the education system. They've never taken like a proper exam the same way that some of us have and gone through that stress. So how can we really like create structures that really help them to pursue these qualifications, but also like compensating their efforts, like while they're going for training, providing with stipends and monetary resources to travel down if they have to take the exam, so that they can still provide for their family's needs. They still have children, they still have to feed these children. Yeah, so I think really thinking how we can level the playing field for training, like what Dr. Irene was saying. But on the other side, if they have talents like cooking, sewing, crafting, how can we also support these occupations? And I think that's a question that us as society can really think about. Like we talk about clothes, how much are we willing to pay for clothes and all that. Yeah, so, yeah.
Thanks for that. And Dr. Matthews? With regards to platform workers in particular, what are some of the barriers that may prevent them from switching or changing jobs or careers?
I mean, just the fact that, talking about training, I mean, we do know that everybody realizes that training can be helpful, but of course, again, there's only certain belief. I mean, we do know that some kinds of training can work, especially when they have a bit more of a guarantee that they would get you from just training to actual work. It's terrible to go for training and after that, there's nothing that comes after that and you get a square one. People say, you know what, I mean, don't really think that you're suitable, X, Y, Z. So one, of course, people do care about training and people do know if there's training which does translate into work. We talk to many of the platform workers, they're keen to do that, but then there's just no way to do that with the fact that your time is crunched in a particular way. And of course, the way that platforms work and algorithms work, you have to keep working if you're going to get that decent level. And once you've got that decent level, and of course, you can ask platforms, they've got various explanations to this, and they may not agree, but for many of the riders, they feel that, when you come to that level where you get jobs most of the time, if you stop and you take a break, that means essentially you go down the level and you won't get jobs. So later on, when you get back to the platform, let's say you decided that I'll spend more days in the week going out for some training program, whatever else, that will essentially lose their competitiveness within that platform economy, and then they will lose out. So if somehow or other we don't factor those methods for them to be able to get reasonable ways of getting to training, which would lead to some kind of better employment without feeling that they would be penalized in terms of their work. They will lose their ratings or whatever else, their opportunities. Then it's very difficult for them to get there. And then, of course, then essentially what happens is that no other method to move out into something different.
And also I noticed like earlier on when Dr. Irene was sharing about how if you have N-level qualifications, it's very difficult for you to be, getting yourself into another training program that requires a certain level of paper qualification. But having said that, like platform workers and the other workers who are involved in the other low-wage job sectors, they do come with experience that are probably not valued by the new employer. So, I mean, just to throw an example, what do you think would be a skill set of a platform worker that should be valued? How can we see it differently?
Yeah, in fact, many of our platform workers talk about, they talk about the fact that they have to deal with customers and learn how to negotiate that when the food comes too late, or where the restaurant is not doing its job and packing it properly, they have to explain. So a lot of that soft skills, how to deal with customers, those are skills that they have built up through the process. And of course, sadly, at this point of time, that's not necessarily always valued by the market. Employers may not look at that. They may just say, hey, you didn't go for a certificate in customer-facing kind of work, so hey, why should we reward you for that? So I do think that there is some of that. The ability to, of course, when you think about platform workers, one of the big parts that come out is that diligence, right? If you do well on platform work, means you are very diligent, you give yourself to something, and that, of course, needs to be rewarded in any kind of work setting.
And planning skills too. If they plan the routes and all that. Thanks for that. And Vanessa, coming to you now, you were about to tell us how you were trying to switch careers, so all yours now.
Okay, so like I was sharing earlier, so when I decided to leave a 10-year industry of 10 years of work in the early childhood industry, so I came up with an experience I honestly myself to actually get there again to the corporate world to actually ask for another job besides teaching. I had to really had a lot of self-talk and all those kind of things to see whether, am I able to do it? So after much realization and much affirmation from people around me and friends and even colleagues who believed in me, I decided to do so, and I went for my very first interview. Okay, so this is also in the teaching industry. So it was more so of customer service and liaising with parents. So for that job interview, so the resume has been sent. I was called for the interview, so I believe the interviewer had actually read through my resume, right? So I go there very, of course, nervous, but still confident that, I'm going to say something that they might like to hear. Then she has a lot of questions for me. She asked me a lot of questions, and then she came to this one interesting question. So she talked about my skill set, my education. So she goes through like that. Then she looks at me like that. She goes through like that. I'm like, okay, so yeah, okay. And it's my first interview as it is. So then she said, okay, so Vanessa, do you know how to do micro and macro? So first she asked me, do you know how to do Excel sheets? Then I said, yes. So rate your proficiency. So I said, I can work on a spreadsheet, but is there something that you're looking at? Or do you know how to do micro and macro? Then I was like, micro and macro? No, I do not know how to do it. And I have never needed to do it in my previous job. So if you teach me, I'm able to learn. Oh, and she goes like, oh, and I'm like, oh, okay. So, and then I was thinking what she would say next, and what she told me next was really very startling. In fact, I felt very bad because she said that this is why we do not hire preschool teachers. Oh, then I was like, I'm a preschool teacher, and that's why you actually called me. So I'm assuming that you know what I have been doing for the past 10 years of my life, and that's why you called me here today to see whether I'll add value to your organization, and you tell me now you are a preschool teacher, so what am I supposed to do, cry? I do not know how to react. And then at that point of time, I was like so upset. I say, that was my reaction. Would you be able to teach me, or is there someone to guide me or mentor me during that process? Oh no, you actually... we can, but it's like, we have to go through, and this is something that but the job was to liaise to parents. I'm not doing some data collection here, to do micro and macro and all that kind of thing. So the job description, the job scope that was stated in the interview form was actually so much different from what she was asking. So these are the things that actually and it was my very first interview. So it was like when I went home that day, right, I was honestly, I was very, very discouraged, very, very heartbroken. I was thinking, is this really going to be the world out, aside from teaching, or should I go back to teaching? Because it took me a long while to actually detach myself from the fact that I'm not going to be teaching. And I understand that every job, right, like that we try, they ask you for some skills, and for people who have been in the teaching industry, yes, we teach children, we teach them language and all that. We can speak well, we talk to parents, we can liaise with parents and everything's. But when we come out to the corporate world, I know you want us to do like things that are more administrative and all that kind of thing. But yes, we are willing to learn. But how much are employers willing to consider mentoring us? Is there a mentor in place? Is there someone who can actually guide us when we transition over to the job? Is there any courses that we can attend? Is there like an option, or are you just going to say, oh no, you're a preschool teacher? She even said this thing, I can remember, you guys have been away from the digital world very long. I say, but I got a handphone, I got a laptop. Okay, but I'm just thinking. So, it's not that bad. I know how to use it. I can send emails. We email parents. We do like e-portfolio. It's not like those are not paperwork. Paperwork, but it's still digital. So she used this kind of term. So it was like, even willing, even like giving me a trial period. They rejected me. And then she, of course, naturally, a couple of weeks later, there was a rejection email. But, I know she's going to reject me already. Based on how that interview went. But that was the very first interview. So it was really very heartbreaking. Like, if a person wants to do well, I need a job that's flexible. That's why I'm stepping out of my comfort zone so that I can cater for my children's need. But at the same time, I do not want to sit home. I do not want to depend on social services, and when I am well and able to actually go out and work, I want to do something. But when I am trying to do something, I meet employers like this. Not like you, but other employers like this. Yeah. Okay. He's a very good employer. So I would think so. So, and for upskilling, so as a mother, I want to upskill myself. And so for early childhood, when I actually had this entire conversation with my principal, so the questions that they asked me were valid. So it means that I would have to teach half day in the morning and have lessons half day, which means my salary would naturally be halved as well. But then again, like I shared with you all earlier, with my salary being half, what would I be bringing home? $1,000, $900, those kind of salary. I can't run my family with that kind of salary. So then, it is really something that's not practical. Is there there's no support for single moms like us? Is there any bursary that we can have? There's nothing to top up for us that when we decide to upskill, who's going to take care of our children in the evening? Who can we rely on? These were all the thoughts that I had. So that is why I left the teaching industry and went out to this parent liaison, because I can speak to parents. So when I went there, this new environment that I had, allows me to work from home. I am still that N-level holder. I didn't complete any diploma. I didn't do any degree. But today I earn at least over $1,000 more, just based on my 10 years of teaching experience. I did not sit for any diploma. But the reason why I'm actually sharing this, it's very sad that the teaching industry didn't identify this. Even to make me a lead teacher or senior teacher, they didn't even consider, because they said paper first. I cannot give you paper because I got children. So, that is my situation, because I'm a single mom. So I can't give you the papers that you want. But I can try, I can do it. But was there any support given by my employer? No, at that point of time. So, yes.
Sorry to interrupt here, Vanessa. Just to clarify too, your salary as a preschool teacher, you worked in a childcare center, right? Yes. Which means you start at what time in the morning and end off at what time?
Okay, so it's very interesting. So we start at, so for the earliest shift that I do, normally after I send my kids off, it's an 8:15 shift, and I would probably leave at 6 o'clock. Yeah. So 8:15 to 6 o'clock. Our lunch is 45 minutes in the classroom with all the beautiful children. Yeah, so every day our colleagues are our kids. We talk to them. And we do not get that 45 minutes of, I am going to eat, do not disturb me. If they are crying, drop your spoon, your fork, go and carry that child, put them on your lap and continue eating. And they ask you, what are you eating, rice? Yes. That kind of thing. Yeah, but we love to do that. I did that for 10 years. I honestly, today where I am, it's a new job, but I thank every milestone. I'm not being regretful, but I just feel a little bit disappointed with the early childhood industry, that what kind of things that what kind of opportunities that it has to offer the teachers who are actually shaping the future of tomorrow. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that personal story with us. And I don't know anything about micro or macro either. Do any of you know what that is here? Anyway, moving on to the next question, could we have a conversation about adequate social protections, which I think carry on very nicely from what Vanessa was sharing about her working conditions as a preschool teacher. What would be considered adequate social protection, and how the lack thereof are linked to in-work poverty and precarity? So maybe I thought I'd like Zihong to start off first, since he runs a business too and a employer, so to speak.
I think this mirrors in everything a HR policy should have. And when I went back and after this, the rehearsal of this conversation, I went back to take a look at everything that we do. When you look at adequate social protections, you really need to look at the whole life of the person coming to work with you. They spend half or maybe most of their time with you as your employee. So you do need to take care of them. You do need to think about every aspect of their life. I think it's quite fancy, and sorry to use the word sexy nowadays, to say bringing a whole person to work, right? It's become a very fancy term that we employ to say that you have to show up as who you are, but employers have to take care of that whole person as well. So in Julie's at least, this is something that we do quite frequently. We have a very distributive mindset about how we distribute our profits, how we take care of salaries, how we take care of our compensation. And with that, I think many businesses may not be able to do that because, like from Julie's is a family business. I think when we make decisions, it's easier to get to people's hearts, right? But if you are a business of many faceless investors, then it's much more objectifying, right? It's very profit driven. It's very numbers or top line or bottom line driven. So for us, it's very important that we treat our employees as family members, and we take care of them as such. So I think I springboard to this point because the conversation about adequate social protections is really a conversation about, how you treat people fundamentally. Yeah.
Yeah, they call off social protection aspects. I think every job people should be able to have from it. So obviously, it's a whole range of things, ensuring people have enough for retirement. So jobs would need to provide some kind of thing that will allow them to have savings for retirement, which is, in Singapore, is very clear at CPF. Medical benefits, which are important. So people don't have to say because, you have the right, if you're not well, then go see a doctor, get help, there's paid leave. You don't have to be sick and still work. I think we're a bit more familiar with that now because of COVID, but if it's not a cough and cold, but something else wrong with your body, people may not even think about that. Ensuring, I think, increasingly today, when training is so important, providing people paid leave to go about doing a reasonable training in the year. There are other things that I think we think about social protection. Think about in terms of if the business decides to terminate you for some reason, there must be some kind of compensation for that. A lot of businesses do, but some don't, some kind of severance pay, proper compensation for overtime. Again, this is dicey. We do have laws which require people to be compensated for overtime, but I think quite a bit of our interactions, we realize that after it's met, people still continue to work, and for various reasons, companies cannot pay them for that extra time. Can there be ways to compensate at that point? So, quite a few things.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, I can't say much for the corporate side or the business side, but I think, I know Dr. Irene said that, improving the training would mean that perhaps clients wouldn't have to keep going back for financial assistance. But I do think that there needs to be a little bit more done to assure families that they're able to feed their children and be able to manage preventing their debts from mounting. Yeah, so I think I believe having adequate social protection is about really understanding the gaps that families face and agreeing to kind of support these families to plug these chronic gaps. Because if not, we won't really, it's a long journey for them to achieve any sort of long-term improvements. Yeah, so I think when it comes to applying for financial assistance, I think really their arrears and their debt situations should really be taken into consideration, because for now, when they apply, actually, they mainly look at whether or not they're able to meet their basic needs. So arrears and debts are totally not considered at all. And I think, lastly, when we talk about, I guess for like Vanessa and like many of the clients that I work with, they're single moms, or they may not have the support of their extended family for child minding. I think we can think about what are some flexible child minding or childcare arrangements to really support like upskilling or people who have difficulties with their work arrangements. And I think this would actually prevent a lot of families from being labeled as like negligent. I think they're just trying to make trying to make ends meet. But I think when we as social services, when we maybe see a child that is latchkey, then we label and we think that all these other things can happen, but there are lots of structural things that we can also do to be preventive. Yeah.
We'd like to hear from you as well.
Okay, one moment please. Okay, so earlier I was thinking, I think on behalf of all those who are actually experiencing in-work poverty, I'd just like to ask, right, the HR departments not to withstand or consider too much from hiring single moms or even people from the vulnerable community, because they are actually, we are all talented individuals. We can be a valuable asset to your organization. Just that, just be reassured, right, that when we are given the right remuneration, benefits, flexibility for every valid reason to care for our family or our be it our aged parent or for whatever reason that we're actually trying to get that job, and the freedom to work, individuals, right, like us who are actually trying to break this actually vicious cycle of poverty, will go all out to make a difference. Yeah, not only because you are actually entrusting us with a job that can actually better our life. So we will definitely, do our best to benefit the organization. That's something that I would like to tell all the HR. So please do not think too much. Do hire people who are single mom, who are from the vulnerable community. Yeah, please do. And of course, I'm actually looking at much or more support for mothers, especially single mothers. Like, I know if, we want to upskill. Honestly, if you ask me, would I want to be an N-level holder all my life? No, I do not. I want to have a degree. Of course, certain decisions that I made when I was younger didn't allow me to pursue my study, but it's not that I'm not capable. I want to do it again. And I would definitely want to do it even better now, because I want to be a role model for my children. I want to see 3 graduates from my house also, yeah? So, sorry. Yeah. So, of course, do give us some support to actually pursue our education, or, to upskill to meet, we want to meet the demands of the working world. We want to do that, yeah. And this can only happen, right, if opportunities are given. If I have to study half a day, I would love to do so, but that cannot compromise on the time that I'm actually nurturing my child. Yeah, so that's something that I actually ask. And know that when supported, individuals who actually desire a difference, right, will be willing to do whatever it takes to make a difference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. One more question, and maybe another two. What are some things the government, corporations, / private sector and individuals can do to make improvements to the situation? Zihong, maybe you can start.
Okay. I think there can be and should be audits for choosing vendors that pay sustainable wages and have good employment practices. I think part of the ESG shtick, right, is to do that, but I don't think it's enough, right? Because there are still many who underpay. and to industries that are known to underpay their employees, like the cleaning industry in Singapore, and industries where the most vulnerable are hired. And I don't mean just vulnerable in terms of parental status, but in terms of educational status as well. But we also need to collectively sit down and flag these industries out and look closely at what they're doing. But to be honest, I feel that this requires a collective, which is what I mentioned today. We're here for collective action. This requires a collective sensitivity and awareness about things. Why are we underpricing some of the industries, right? So corporates, consumers, and citizens need to ask themselves serious questions about the cost of things. A few months ago, I went to a town hall to talk to an MP about something. And then people were really upset about the price of chicken rice and because inflation has gone up, right? So it went from $3 to $4. But when I was a 10-year-old boy, and now I'm like 32 years ago, the price of a plate of chicken rice was $2.50 to $3. 3 months ago, I went to a town hall, right? And then the price of chicken rice has gone up to, $3.50 to $4. Now, if you inflation adjust chicken rice from 30 years ago, it should be at least $20 right now. Yeah, and we're still complaining about it, right? And people are still complaining about it. And then we expect our chicken rice to be still $2.50 and $3 when our property prices have gone out astronomically. So where are our heads, people, right? How can we allow this, right? Similarly, why do we expect our early childhood educators to be lowly paid? If, as Vanessa has said, this is the most important time of their childhood development, why are we paying them so low? And how is it that real estate companies in countries that employ local construction workers with sustainable wages can turn a profit, and that real estate companies here profess that they can't, right? Is it because they can't, or let's be honest, they don't want to, right? Well, I speak for the corporate part, right? Oh, and there's one more point. Why isn't my $8,000 EMBA, right, not talking about anything like this, like underemployment, working poor, right? There's something missing in the corporate part of what we do. If the EMBAs are not talking about this as a crucial part, right, nothing will translate down, right? While I say all these things, I also feel that, there are also lots of good things that are happening in the corporate world. I feel that a lot of the, what do they call it? Social enterprises are more attuned, especially the young social enterprises, are more attuned to these things like wage equality, workplace equality, and workplace access as well, and universal learning as well. So there are good things to be gleaned from, I think, the younger organizations. They want more equality. So I think some of the things that corporates can do is in their annual salary review, take a look at the most vulnerable populations in the payroll and take into consideration what the macro environment provides for them. So when I went back and spoke to my mom, who is one of the directors of Julie's, right, immediately she did a salary audit of all the cleaners in Julie's, right? And so these are the kinds of things that would spark action. I think they are the most vulnerable population as well. You as an employer, you need to know that they are under your care. And they came here to better their lives. This is one of the things that strike me as an employer for foreign migrant workers. A lot of manufacturing plants in Malaysia are reliant on foreign migrant workers. Malaysia cannot supply lots of things to Singapore if we do not have foreign migrant workers from Bangladesh, Nepal. But one of the things that I get really stuck with, and I'm trying to find ways to do this, is that when they can't stay in Malaysia for too long, and they cannot get access to certain types of status, like citizenship or permanent residence, and they go back maybe marginally better than what they came with, right? I'm trying to find a way to uplift their skills. So as corporates, there are opportunities. I don't know how many of you here are corporates, right? Or if you didn't raise your hands and you're hiding, but don't hide, right? But you can do these things to make the lives of your employees better. They are here to improve their lives. They are here to upskill. They're here for upward social mobility. And you need to play a part, a very, very sensitive part in doing so. So for example, when we talked last time, right? It's interesting because one of the best of you is actually inspired by a single parent as well. And one of the things we do in Julie's is we always keep our eyes pried out. And that makes Julie's HR a bit nosy because we start to ask personal questions. Hey, how's your family and stuff? But we're keeping our eyes pried out for single families, single parent families, because we know that they're more vulnerable. And then we have this thing called the Love Fund to support them as well. So the Love Fund is contributions from all employees, whatever they want to give, and a lot of it comes from top management, and we support especially single parent families. Yeah. So it's really things that corporates can do, and I just really have to, rein them in and just say, these are simple things you can do. Yeah, I think one of the other things that we all can do as well is to go to our business associations, the business associations that we belong to, rally them into action. So if, for example, make your business association hire sustainably. Yeah. If they're paying cleaning workers very low wage and they know that this is not sustainable, right, kick them out of the business association. So these kinds of things, I think, business can do. Yeah. Sorry, I took a lot of time.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Dr. Matthew?
Thanks. There's some things I think that we should be looking at, especially when it comes to low-wage work. There could be quite a lot more job redesign of low-wage work in terms of how it's carried out. Allowing it to have some kind of dignity. We're quite aware about graduate type of work. Everybody's very careful. Be careful. HR knows. Be careful when you speak to someone who has got a bit more of an educated background. Be courteous. Be nice. If you want to say something nasty, think very carefully before you say it. But that same sensitivity doesn't happen when people who are low-wage work. People have a different way of looking at it. They say, these guys can take it, right? Just say it like you want. We tend to have somehow or another we feel that people of different social backgrounds, particularly wages, don't have the same kind of psychological needs and emotional needs, but it's the same across the board. And I think being able to be sensitive and know the different backgrounds, particularly for those who are vulnerable, who have to deal with many issues, which some of us who have got more privileged backgrounds don't have to deal with. You don't have to deal with the lack of a partner to help out with childcare. You don't have to deal with the disadvantages that come with living in rental homes or a much smaller unit. And so those things people need to have some empathy about. Then, of course, there are a lot of job redesign. So people have dignity. They feel that job has a future. There are ways by which people are willing to invest, employers are willing to invest, so that someone who may not have all the qualifications is nurtured towards something which would really be productive. So I think that's something that we really need to do. But coming back, I just want to jump on something that I think Sehong mentioned, and some things that were just running through my mind. If ultimately, I think one of the big things that we see in Singapore, if you want to see people move up the ladder, and we clearly know, if you look at the general language we talk about, productivity, make sure people have training so they can access better kind of work. Then, of course, you heard Vanessa mention quite a bit about the struggles. It's just not very possible to do that kind of upgradings, particularly if you've got families, you've got children to care about. And then, of course, the natural answer is that, hey, what if society made it possible for individuals who may not have been able to get that kind of training early in life, for whatever reason, later on when there's an appetite, there's an interest to do that, then society will kind of subsidize, make sure that they have enough of a living wage to be able, or allowance, whatever, a grant, so that they can study, upgrade themselves with somebody else. or society itself pulls together to make sure that they are taken care of and the children are taken care of. It's something that I guess when we ask around here, I think everybody would nod in approval and say, yeah, why not? But of course, that equals to perhaps higher taxes and other kinds of things. People get very upset and they say, well, you know what, why should I work very hard? I did my best in school. I didn't waste my time. I got my degree. Then I deserve this. Others should not. So hopefully there is a little change in how society thinks about this, that we are willing to consider the fact that not everybody has the same privileges at the beginning. Some people may not have attained some things, and maybe there needs to be help later on, and we should be willing to provide that.
And Rachel, would you like to add on?
Okay, yeah, I think I just want to talk to two people. First is the corporates. I think Dr. Irene was pointing about how we should work closer together. And I think that's definitely a call that we can do together. And I think I just want to also highlight that actually recently we actually have like this partnership with Salesforce, and they actually wanted to provide like training opportunities for our clients, and even offering like what Dr. Irene mentioned about mentoring, right? So making sure that the clients are able to actually complete the self-learning process and hopefully pass the certification. So if there are more corporates out there who want to reach out to social service agencies, you can email, not just us, but I think also lots of other social service providers. And it'll be even better if across social service agencies, if you can really work together to really pool our resources and our minds to really channel our efforts together. And I think the second thing is for us as social service professionals to really think about what our interventions are like when it comes to helping to improve the livelihoods of our clients. I think a lot of where the conversation is in social work now is a lot about a lot of clinical work, things about like trauma, risk, but the reality is that our clients are also facing a lot of bread and butter issues. So based on my observation of having worked 4 years, I don't see us really putting in that concerted effort to really think about what are some practical things and structures that we can do alongside with our clients. And I think that would be a really great thing that we could do, rather than just work on some of the clinical things and then saying, okay, I think you've managed well long enough, go back into the community like that. And I think lastly also, I think for social service agencies, I think something that AMKFSC has done is also to hire people that do have soft skills. And I think that's really reflected in our community hub. I think we have some of the people who are actually our community workers, and they would probably be way better community workers than our university trained, not saying that there's anything wrong with the university trained people. I mean, I'm one of them. Yeah, but I think really when we can witness and see how they do their work and how they interact with the clients, I think we just really need to open our eyes to see what are the soft skills that they have and what they can really bring to the table so that we can work together with them. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, just because we're pressed for time, very quickly, if you can just summarize some key takeaways for the sake of our audience here, what kind of changes do we wish to see in conversations surrounding in-work poverty? Can we start with Vanessa?
Like what Su Hong mentioned, right, about the HRs out there, and the corporates do support the HR teams, in work poverty. So they are actually at work, they are in your offices, and do have conversations with them, like your staff regularly, to see how actually they are doing, how's their family doing, how's their, if they have an ill parent, or they have a disabled child, or they are a single mom, do have that conversation, not those weekly team meetings or staff bonding that happens once every 6 months, but regular sessions that hey, can I meet you for lunch? Can we chat a little? Do you need some support? Actually, when people know that they have flexibility and support, I need to say this again and again and again, they will definitely give their best. They will, yeah, as long as they know that anyone who has support, right, they can go, they can go very far. Just be that hand of support. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Vanessa said as well, is just really corporates can, especially big corporates, can actually pay attention to the industries that, for example, are perennially underpricing or underpaying their employees, and do something about it. They can, right? Don't turn a blind eye to it. Do something about it. And then I think, like what I said, the audits as well can include more of these sustainable employment practices, and yeah.
Yeah, I think for social workers, let's take in what Dr. Irene said about her research. Let's actually come together and let's have more conversation and put in some practical things that we can really do and roll out and do together with our clients.
Yeah, and lastly, I think in terms of policy work, I think increase whether it's public interest government interest to make sure that those who are not adequately covered, not properly protected, will get that protection as soon as possible.
A big thank you to all of you here for sharing so many invaluable insights. And now I'd like to open up the floor for questions. So first, again, to the live audiences, and then subsequently to the online viewers. So for the live audience, we have one question there. If someone could bring the mic over. Thank you.
In the spirit of conversation, I actually have an observation and one specific recommendation to make. On the observation, the question of why there's persistent in-work poverty, low wage, low benefit, low protection. It's been suggested that this is the market failure, result of market failure. We really should think about whether it is a feature of the market. A feature of the market because every suggestion made here may be taken up by an enlightened corporation. But the nature of market and competition is that someone will exploit the low outcome niche. For everyone that wants to create conditions for, let's say, training, retention, advancement, there will be those that will exploit the space. At the beginning, I think Sihan was speaking about cracks, right? The nature of the market is to allow and encourage people to find the cracks, to exploit the cracks, and to use them whenever there is one. The problem of gig and platform workers is a beautiful example of this. What you have is a new form of work that falls outside the definition of employment. Therefore, it falls outside all the protection of employment laws that are there. So we speak of solutions like medical leave, for example. Yeah, that won't apply to your gig worker because he falls outside. One solution, of course, is to change the law. But this is where the nature of the market is important. Because however we change the law, the market is always looking for the crack in the system. And every time new technology introduces new ideas and new forms of businesses, the cracks will be there. This is where I get to my recommendation. I think we need to change the structure of markets and businesses. How do we begin to do that? My one suggestion is this: mandatory corporate reporting on a triple bottom line basis. Basically, every company that's not an exempt private company must report on matters other than, in addition to financial health. These figures are available. They only have to be reported. For example, number of dangerous occurrences are reported to MOM per 100,000 man-hours, or in the last 5 years. The average wage of all employees according to gender, male, female. Turnover rates. Turnover rates in terms of, again, maybe every 1,000 employees. What we have to do is develop a metric, require that it be reported. These are easily found matrices. Have them reported and make them transparent. Once they are transparent, people can act on them. We can understand what's happening. We can understand the basis upon which the profit is made, right? We need to have this. What difference will it make? For example, if we are speaking of ethical investors, they need this information in order to make those investment decisions. If we are talking about contracts given by the public to companies, this can be a consideration. If we are talking about employment, you want to seek employment, you want to know what is the nature of your company, your employer, you can find that information. And to do that, we need to push on a policy basis for triple bottom line reporting. Thank you.
Thanks. Do any of the speakers here want to address or add on to that? Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, so much for your suggestion. I want to respond in the sense of, I agree with you, it's the nature of the market, but at the same time also there is a market failure. I think the nature of the market failure here is that there's a great monopoly power by the corporates, or in the case of labor, it's monopsony power. And in these three circles of policy, corporates, and the worker, right, the voice of the corporate is very strong. So I think your suggestion is really great, where we then mandate that kind of reporting. I think a lot of the market failure here is about how the industries gather in such a way that the lowest bottom end workers can be exploited, and the corporates can have all kinds of reasons to pay the low wages, to have low protection and the poorer conditions. So thank you for that suggestion, but I just thought that there's this dimension which makes it, in a way, nature of the market, but also because of the unequal power here. And for the fact that we here, and I want to echo what Zihong has said about the collective voice, corporates have strong voice, so workers have weak voice, and as a collective, it's important to raise that voice, and I thank the organizers for this event where we can collectively have stronger voices together.
And I don't know, just putting it out there, probably as consumers too, we just buy products from companies that are paying sustainable wages or have better work conditions, you know. I mean, those are options that we can make too. We have a question up there, and I think it's kind of related to what you were suggesting earlier. There's been a lot of debate around the gig worker economy, labor protections, and wage stability. So what policy do you think we need here? Something similar to progressive wage. Do any of you want to answer that?
Yeah, maybe I can just give my first stab on that. And particularly because gig work is something that will probably, as Rudy mentioned, will have a lot larger influence in the years to come. And you know, it's something that where really the kind of regulations are required. And I think there are a few things which are very, very clear. The labor protections in terms of the ensuring retirement adequacy. So I think the aspect of making sure people in Singapore is not just about CPF, is not just about retirement adequacy, it's also about being able to get a house, being able to ensure that your children who they need a university education can get into that and be able to be paid for. So CPF, I think, is a very big part of it. Then, of course, the various issues about health care coverage, which is really not absent today. And I think it has an effect if you think about gig workers who work in any of the platform kind of work, who would skip getting healthcare because they feel that by doing that they will lose out. And it's a fact, they will lose out if they don't continue to be in that job. And if you don't have that protection that they can actually go off and get healthcare, get medical leave, recover, then what happens is that their body is affected in a particular way, which then has a major cost in the longer term. Of course, will keep them in the poverty, and of course will affect the rest of the family. So when it comes to, retirement adequacy, healthcare protection, some type of method to ensure that, currently what you have is a system by which, the platforms have complete power in terms of determining the wage structure. And if they want to give today $5, they can give. They want to cut down and say, there are tons of people who have entered into our app, and all of them are hungry to do this job. And why should I give you, $8 for this delivery? I can just give you half of that. There needs to be some kind of protection so that there will be a kind of reasonable type of amount that these platforms will be able to put out.
Thank you for that. Just because of time constraints, we're just going to take questions from live and online at the same time. We have one question from a live audience member here. Can we pass him a mic?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the panelists. It's very enlightening to listen to all of you. I think I have a few sort of comments and a question, right? Low wages in relative terms has always been around. There will always be people who are paid less than others. But it seems like a lot of our conversation today has to do with the fact that in Singapore, many of our low-wage workers are exploited. They are paid an exploitatively low wage, one that does not allow them to live with dignity and to be able to afford living in Singapore. So my first question would be, when did this happen? Has this always been the case in Singapore? I'm a lot younger than I actually look, so maybe I don't recall when it was, but has this always been the case in Singapore? Is this something that is new? And if it is, what could have instigated this to happen? And secondly, I think there was some conversation about the idea of a minimum wage. Okay, I would love to hear the panelists' perspective. Is that something, a minimum wage that helps with the bandwidth tax? It helps to take away and frees up for our low-wage workers to pursue education, to pursue skills upgrading. Because to do all of this, you need time, you need space, which many of us, including myself, are fortunate to have that, but many others don't. So can I hear your thoughts on minimum wage? Thank you.
I mean, I don't really have much to say specifically about minimum wage, but I guess I resonate with the idea that there should be a minimum wage, that people should know that when they are employed, that they know that they'll get that minimum sum. But I think my experience also is not that it's just about the wages. And I don't know if this is something that social workers experience because they encounter the families, but I think there are a lot more complex issues aside from the minimum wage, like non-normative things that happen to the family that can't really be just solved by a policy. There's no like blanket policy that will just make things easier. But I'm also quite young, so I'm not too sure when this issue of, these low wages happen. But I guess I suppose it may also have to do with, I guess what Dr. Irene was saying about education, right? Like the majority of people who are in their 20s now would possibly have a degree or a diploma. And I think that it's quite different from Singapore in the 50s and 60s, where everyone was kind of at the same level. And I think that inequality wasn't so drastic. But perhaps I'll let some of the academics or the corporates answer this question.
Maybe just a quick point. I think people have argued about the fact that with the fact that we do have low-skilled migrants in Singapore, and of course that has a way of depressing wages. So one aspect has been trying to push up the wages of low-skilled migrants, then perhaps there's some kind of parity which would be possible. So it's been, Singapore's economy has been open for a long time, and so of course that would be one of those issues. And in general, unlike some other societies which have pushed very hard to ensure that labor is protected, I think Singapore, of course, the notion that the workers were very important right from the start of Singapore's independence, I think there's no question about it. But there's also this concern that you cannot make conditions so difficult for foreign businesses to come in. You want investors. So there's a lot of that. And of course, the balancing of it is always going to be a situation where, sadly enough, I think especially in the lower tier, you have the effects where the kind of system of the market has resulted in them having much lesser, probably a salary which is a lot more similar to what a migrant worker would have. I think for the issue about minimum wage, I think many of you might be familiar with the arguments that the government have put out, that in places where minimum wage has been possible, it kind of then results in a kind of, much lower possibility in terms of salary. People just try to aim towards the minimum. So the standard response, I think if you probably have heard from the government, has been that if you can kind of increase the progressive wage model to many more industries and provide the kind of roadmap and training opportunity, then across the board you'll be able to find work and opportunities where people can keep moving up. And so it won't be just a floor, it will be a base, but people will be aiming to move up.
Okay.
Again, in the spirit of conversation, I just want to very quickly, a couple of things. First of all, if I just address the comment raised by the gentleman over there, I have been in a company which reported minimum, the wages of the people, all right, of all the standards, by gender, by level, and even the ratio of the minimum wage to the CEO's wage. And when it came to the shareholder AGM, I had to prepare a list of questions that shareholders might ask. We had none, because no one cares. They only want to see your bottom line. Unfortunately, that's the case. So I can tell you that even if non-listed companies had to do it, I'm pretty sure no one would care. All right, they're really caring about the cost. I just want to address your comment on inequality. Existed since colonial times. I can tell you for a fact that the Eurasians, the Chinese, all those races got a third of the pay that the British would have gotten. So 1800s would be the answer to that question. I firmly believe that the policy, as Associate Professor was saying just now, policy is the leading thing. I agree with you, Zayong, that corporates have the voice. But I think corporates themselves are tied by the consumers. And you're right just now, the consumers also have the power. They're the power behind the corporates. I'm on my MCST council, and when it comes to time to reevaluate our security agency, right, it's the same thing. How can we choose the non-lowest one? Because then how we can answer to all the other residents, you see, and they'll make noise, they'll question us. And then when we do that, I'm sorry to say, we appoint the lowest one usually. I see the same security people in the new company. Why? Because they're simply hired again at the lowest. So that's their minimum wage, which is, so I think for us, I think the framing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not about lowest wage, because he's right. There will always be people who earn lower wages. It's what's the minimum livable wage? Minimum livable wage so that everyone can live in Singapore. That's my take on it, And if the government, and I'm very familiar with the government's stand on minimum wage, I don't agree, but do you all think that there's perhaps a balance between the progressive wage and the minimum wage? I'm just curious to see whether, because I can't think of one, but I think there may be something that the government might be open to thinking about.
So I actually think I don't know if the reasons that you disagree with the take on the minimum wage is the same as mine, but I feel that it's really we're trying to answer the same question with the progressive wage model and minimum wage. We're trying to introduce what you're trying to say here as a living wage, right? A sustainable living wage. I think this is why we are all in the room for. Yeah. But yeah, I think when you tapped into the MCST issue, right, it comes back to corporates again. It comes back to how, it also full circle to consumers, because I wanted to rebut immediately saying that some corporates have more power than others. And we're in the manufacturing line as well, and I'm very well aware that certain corporates have so much more power than me at my value chain, because we are pressed as well. And if we look up furthermore the value chain, and you'd see that the financial sector in certain countries have so much more power. And a long time ago, I mean, manufacturing biscuits was much more lucrative than what it is right now, because a lot of the things have changed. So I guess my point to that is that even as consumers, even as even as corporates, right? I think we're here for collective action. We do have a voice. We have to speak up, and even people. I wanted to say people living in poverty as well. They also need to speak up. We sometimes come to the room and talk about them as though they don't have agency, but if you're not doing well at work, or you're not paying well, or being paid well in work, I think you need to speak up as well. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I went a little bit left field with the question.
So exercise our purchasing power, everybody.
Can I also just add?
Yeah.
Okay, for the early childhood sector, let me say. All right, so we have these AOP and POP, anchor operator and private operator. So, of course, naturally, when you graduate and come out of your early childhood school, and then you will go to both operators. So you will actually see, of course, where the demand is, that's where you will apply. So normally, centers like anchor operators, they have a different set of wages offered, and their incentives are different. The bonuses are definitely more than a private operator sector, and and they have more work-life balance in that sense, and most of their things are done online, and things like that. So, but the job scope for both sides is the same. It's the same children, the same job that you do across, like whether you're working under an anchor operator or private operator. But for private operators, because you have like your top people are your investors and all that from different countries and all that. But every single time under a private operator, this is things that we hear in we discuss in our classes, or when we have like staff meetings, we speak about it, and we always realize, right, when you place your expected wage, your expected salary, they will come back to you with a different kind of salary, and they will tell you, okay, you take it or you leave it. Because there's always a teacher who's coming out of the school, early childhood school, and then there's, of course, that's the reason of the high turnover rate as well. If you have a preschool child, you will actually see. And what I would like to say is, like, I mean, the job is the same. The children are the same. What we are teaching them is the same. Of course, certain centers, even though, the curriculum, they say they are top-notch, whatnot, it's when it comes to, like, paying your teachers, are you actually doing it? Are you doing it? We don't have an option to work from home. We can't teach your toddler, hey, sit down, from home, They're probably going to run around the screen, later, break or bang the screen. So, that kind of thing. There's no, like, options to work from home, work remotely, or anything like that. But so, the thing is, like, my question is, why is there like honestly, there's such a divide, when the job is the same thing done across the both sides. So I just want to tell the policymakers, there should be a market value, because each preschool has a market value of its own. This is our market price. Everybody tells you this is which market are you talking about? That kind of thing. So it's like there should be a standardized market value for teachers, so that they get that dignity and respect that they need. Yeah, for the work that they do, of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Sorry, very quickly, just want to say something, because I think what Vanessa pointed out was very important. We talk about value a lot, right? And what you mentioned just now about the reporting, right? It seems like we're supposed to be talking about value, but once we really get down to the ground, everything is about cost, and we forget that cost is not value. So, like, if we're going to report these kinds of things, I don't think we need to just report on the bottom line. In your prospectus, make it such that every time you click, you're going to the bottom line, right? Click on all the value creation things that the company has done. Make it pop so that people know that this company is not just about value, and that when you're hiring your security guard firm, right, that security guard firm should put up all the value creation rather than just the cost, right? So that your MCST is convinced we're going to not go for the cheapest one. Yeah. There you go.
Thanks for that. Okay, one last question. Oh, okay, so we don't have any more time for any more questions, but I think there's one here we'll take. Okay, yes.
Since when the low wage, to my best knowledge, I worked to low-wage workers in the 1980s, early 1980s. Since Singapore began industrialization, has always been a low wage. And so beneath all the points that were raised today, I just wonder whether underlying all the different policies, there's some mindset factors that is unspoken. And I just wonder aloud whether there's some political consideration to this whole idea of relation to economic policies and low wage. That's my comment.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions that we didn't have time to take on, please again go to our Facebook page and then put your questions there, and we'll answer them, okay? Thank you. Let's give a big hand to our panel of speakers. You can return to your seats now. Yeah. Just to sum up, urban poverty is, as we all know, a very complex issue. And in this event, our focus was on in-work poverty. How in an urban, fast-paced society, working hard is seen as essential for success. But as we have also seen and heard from today's event, it's true that work hard is not enough, particularly for those in the low-wage sectors where their work is acknowledged, whilst their work is acknowledged as essential, but how we perceive, how society perceives their work as reflected in their wages and also in the forms of protections that are given. And so, what I think is the key takeaway for me are the many underlying assumptions and mindsets that act as barrier. Again, the way society values the jobs in terms of wages and protection, or the assumption that everyone has got equal opportunities, a level playing field, or the importance of paper qualifications as opposed to trade, craft, and artistry. Conversations like these help us to sharpen and deepen our gaze. It guides us to reflect on our prejudices, workplace practices, policies, and wage structures, and hopefully spur us to reimagine solutions as a government, employer, and as citizens. And on that note, I'd like to invite the organizers to share their closing thoughts. Once again, Zihong, please.
Hi, thanks for the 2.5 hours spent here. I know some of you are tired, so I'll keep this short. Closing statements are always very challenging to write because I don't really want to end the conversation. It was really so productive today and so fruitful. Thank you, everyone. But because the question that is at the back of my mind is where do we go from here, and it's a big question. I always feel like I want to solve all these social issues. And I, like in one night or something like that, I know it's not possible. But I'm always very thankful that we have social organizations that work very closely together and in such a capacity as well to move the needle. I think one of my key takeaways here today is really about changing the conversation from thinking about these issues, whether it's inequality, poverty, or any other issues under this gamut of inequality issues, from one that is about just individual responsibility, because I think responsibility is very highlighted in a Singaporean context. You're expected to be Confucian. That means a lot of it falls on the individual family. You're expected to be neoliberal as well. That means it's you, the enterprising person who does well in society. A lot of it is about that. But guess what? When we hear the stories today, many people who work hard, also not enough, have been extremely responsible. So why are they not rewarded? Right, so this is not just about individual responsibility, this is about collective responsibility. And we have to change that conversation to exactly that. Because if we don't do that, then what happens is we are being extremely cruel to the people who have fallen behind or who have not become aspired to what they want to be. So when we talk about collective responsibility, I think a lot of people will then ask me, right, so then what do we do, Zihong? How can we help, right? What are the small actions we can take? So here are some of my laundry list of small little actions you can take. All right, first of all is if you've come to this conversation to Reimagine, and for those of you at home viewing through the live stream, if you haven't changed your mindset, change it. Don't think people are poor because they haven't been responsible enough. That's just not true. We all can do better. If you haven't read up on poverty in Singapore, read up on it. Read up on inequality. In fact, one of the best books about inequality is written by a Singaporean author. If you hear your family and friends speak of poverty in narrow and unforgiving ways, have a conversation to them. And in fact, invite them to the next Conversations Reimagine, right? Familiarize yourself with the wealth of support organizations in Singapore. There are really quite a huge number of them doing great work. The so-called many helping hands of Singapore. Get to know them. If you're an employer, be a better employer. Rally your business associations to discuss equitable labor standards. Review your own employment practices. Keep your eyes out for people in your organization who are vulnerable. Rethink your values as an employer. And remember that this system we call free market or competitive capitalism was foremost about the distribution of wealth, not the accumulation of it. Pay a sustainable wage, review your wage compensation structure for gaps, especially when there's an absence of a minimum wage. And reach out to the people whom you know are suffering. A simple gesture can really go a long way. And come to more events like Conversations Reimagine and meet like-minded, passionate people who are keen to be change makers in your community. I want to thank our esteemed speakers today and the Human Library books, where are you? Yeah, for your wonderful contributions. Thank you. To AMKFSC Community Services for being collaborators supreme. It just worked. It just fell into place so nicely. Thank you so much. To the T-Boy team, thank you once again. Everything did fall into place so nicely without a hitch, right? And to Justco for always supporting Conversations Reimagined. We could not be more thankful for how collaborative and how easy you made this on us as well. And I will now pass my time to Bi-Ling, Director Community Development, Strategic Communications and Partnership of AMKFSC Community Services for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Zong. Zong and I, we didn't pakat on our closing remark, but we somehow land on a common theme, which is collective responsibility. I think this shows why we collaborate so well together. Yeah. Of course, his was a lot more thoughtful, a lot more concrete, and a lot more eloquent. So I'm going to make mine very brief, okay? Thank you for doing all the hard work. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to start and end with why we do what we do. I wonder how many of us here in this room are aware that October 17 is the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Show of hands, those who know. Not bad, quite a number of hands up. This is because we are a community of concerned citizens. I'm hoping that October 17 will be like March 8. Everybody knows that October 17 is that day, right? Because October 17 reminds us, every one of us, that we have a part to play for poverty eradication and social equality because of our shared humanity. So today, now that we have a deeper appreciation of all the compounding factors that kept people poor, can we now take a moment to reflect on what we can do as individuals, as citizens, both individually and collectively? In our daily interactions, do we stop to acknowledge and appreciate our cleaners who clean our streets, who clean our hawker centers and our offices? Do we stop to appreciate and acknowledge our migrant workers who build our homes? And do we stop to appreciate our domestic helpers who cook and care for our children? And do we stop to appreciate and acknowledge our preschool teachers who nurture and educate our young? And do we stop to acknowledge and appreciate our delivery workers, our delivery riders who bring food and parcel right to our doorstep? Do we treat and respect all of them as fellow human beings with dignity and worth? And are we prepared to pay them fairly? As professionals, are we aware of our power and privileges? Are we more appreciative now and therefore more willing to take action to address the systemic factors about poverty rather than attribute poverty to poor individual choices? As employers, as managers of workers, are our workplace practices fair and supportive? Are we paying fair wages? As government, are our wage structure and our policies protecting our vulnerable workers enough? Let us take a moment to ponder deeply on what each of us can do in our small and big daily actions to ensure that there is enough for all to go around. Consider the many actionables that Zhi Hong and the panel has presented before us and make a commitment as we head home today. Make a commitment to do something in our daily actions such that working hard is now enough for everyone. Last but not least, I want to take a moment to appreciate again our fellow citizens who so courageously stepped forward to teach us through their lived experiences of poverty and how working hard can still not be enough. So join me in saluting all the Vanessas, all the Irises, and all the Nathalies of the world who remind us of our solidarity as a humanity and taught us today what is humility, what is respect, and what is resilience. Thank you.
Thank you for the very powerful call to action. We've also prepared tokens of appreciation to thank our speakers. So we'd like to invite back on stage, this little stage here, Dr. Matthews, Rachel, please, Vanessa, and of course, Hong. So standing on the mark here, right? Yeah. So, first to Dr. Matthews. And then to Rachel. Oh, to Vanessa, okay. Thank you, Vanessa, for your, thank you for sharing all your powerful personal stories. And Rachel. And of course, to Zihong. Thank you once again. If all of you can smile for the camera. Thank you. And Dr. Matthews, Rachel, and Vanessa, you can return to your seats. Oh, you can step forward. Do you want you? Oh, for me, is it? Okay. Yes, and Irene, we have a token of appreciation for you as well. Yeah, we'll give her a token of appreciation. They always say last but not least. Okay, so first them. Yep. Stepping forward, yeah. Okay, then maybe I can hop in and I'll go into the middle. No, it's okay, it's okay.
All right, and over here, 3, 2, 1, and one more, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, thank you. So Irene, Dr. Matthews, Rachel, and Vanessa can return to your seats. I'd like to now invite Dr. Zihong, yes, okay. I'd like to now invite Dr. Vincent Ng once again to present a token of appreciation to Zihong to commemorate this fruitful collaboration. So do they need to come forward to step into the light as well? Okay. Could both of you kindly... We would love to see your face, so if you can just kindly step into the light. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And thanks to all of you for making time on this Saturday and spending this afternoon with us. A very special thank you also to Eden Sim, our sign language interpreter, for making this entire live stream accessible to our deaf community. Once again, thank you all for being here with us and have a great weekend ahead. Okay, just a general reminder, do visit our exhibition outside if you haven't already and explore the lived experiences of the individuals through a photojournalism approach by photographer Po Yu King, who is right over there. So thanks. And there's also the impossible timetable of Ron at the iPad station. If you like to just experience urban poverty from the perspective of 11-year-old Ron. And don't forget to pen down your thoughts on the wall. You can do that on this wall over here. We love